So we're about to dive into the story of a decorated CIA officer who did something pretty much unheard of. He just said no. We're going to unpack the incredible story of John Kiriakou and the absolutely staggering price he paid for telling the truth.
And here's the central question, the part that just doesn't add up. The one guy who refused to participate in the torture program is also the only person involved who ended up in prison. I mean, how does that even happen? Let's get into it.
All right, to really get this, we've got to rewind the clock to the months right after 9/11. At the time, John Kiriakou was a top-tier counterterrorism officer, actually the head of operations in Pakistan. He was at the absolute peak of his game, having just led the team that captured a huge target, al-Qaeda member Abu Zubaydah.
You know, the whole world was on edge after 9/11, and capturing Abu Zubaydah was a massive, massive win for the CIA. So just a few months later, Kiriakou's back at CIA headquarters, just standing in line for a sandwich, of all things, and he gets an offer that is going to change his life forever.
The thing that's so wild about this is the setting. It wasn't some secret high-level briefing. A senior officer just casually strolls up to him in the cafeteria and asks this question. It was a term Kiriakou had never even heard before. So what did enhanced interrogation actually mean? Well, it was a clean, bureaucratic way of saying a brutal torture program. We're talking about the infamous waterboarding, sure, but also things that Kiriakou learned were even worse. There was the cold cell, where prisoners were chained up naked, doused with ice water, sometimes until they died of hypothermia, and then there's sleep deprivation, keeping someone awake for up to 12 straight days, way past the point where the human body and mind just completely break down.
So faced with that horrifying reality, Kiriakou has a choice to make. And his decision, right then and there, was about to set him on a collision course with one of the most powerful institutions in the entire world.
Now, before he decided, he did the smart thing and asked a senior mentor for advice. And that mentor did not mince words. He called it what it was, a torture program, and gave him this chillingly accurate warning. The unbelievable irony, of course, is that Kiriakou was the one who went to prison, not for torturing, but for refusing to.
And this really shows you just how alone he was. Out of 14 officers who were asked to get trained in these techniques, 13 said yes. John Kiriakou was the only one. The one person who said no because he saw it for exactly what it was, an illegal program that crossed every moral and ethical line.
And the professional backlash? It was immediate. Remember, this is the guy who just caught a major al-Qaeda target, and now he's suddenly being passed over for a promotion. And the official reason they gave? The head of the Counterterrorism Center said his refusal showed a shocking lack of commitment. Just think about that. He was being punished for his principles.
You know, the main justification for torture was always that it was a necessary evil to get vital intelligence, but was it actually effective? Well, the case of the very prisoner Kiriakou helped capture gives us a pretty stunning answer to that question.
So at first, the FBI was in charge of interrogating Abu Zubaydah. Agent Ali Sofan used traditional methods, building rapport, talking, showing respect. It took weeks, but it worked. Abu Zubaydah opened up, gave them intelligence that saved lives, and even revealed the identity of the 9/11 mastermind, Khalid Sheikh Mohammed. Then, the CIA took over and started using their enhanced techniques. The result? He went completely silent. They got nothing.
I mean, the takeaway here is just undeniable, right? Rapport-based interrogation worked. Torture failed, spectacularly. The very program Kiriakou refused on moral grounds was also a catastrophic operational failure. So if it didn't even work, why do it? Well, Kiriakou says it came down to two things: revenge and money. Get this. The CIA had an incredible $180 million contract with the two psychologists who designed the program. With that much money at stake, there was a massive incentive to keep it going, results or no results. So Kiriakou leaves the CIA, and for years he just waits, thinking someone else has to speak out about this. But no one did. Then in 2007, something happened that forced his hand and pushed him to become the one thing he never wanted to be, a whistleblower. A reporter from ABC News had reached out to him, and then he heard President Bush say this. Kiriakou's blood ran cold. He immediately saw what was happening. They were setting up a fall guy, a rogue officer, to blame for the whole thing. And because he had been the one to object internally, he was sure they were going to pin it on him.
To protect himself, he decided to go on the record. He went on ABC News and confirmed 3 explosive truths. Number 1, the CIA was, in fact, torturing prisoners. Number 2, this wasn't some side project. It was official U.S. policy. And number 3,
It was approved by the president himself.
The retaliation from the government was swift, but it was complicated. The CIA filed a crimes report, the FBI investigated for a full year, and then declined to press charges. Case closed, right? Nope. When the Obama administration took office, a top official named John Brennan resurrected the case and just pushed relentlessly until Kiriakou was charged with 5 felonies, including espionage.
A memo that came out later, during the legal proceedings, really exposed the whole game. Even after the Justice Department said they didn't think Kiriakou had committed espionage, Brennan wrote back, "Charge him anyway and make him defend himself. It's right there in black and white." This wasn't about justice, it was about punishment.
After a years-long legal fight that completely bankrupted him, Kiriakou was forced to take a plea deal. But the story doesn't end there, because the truth, the very truth he was being punished for telling, was about to be confirmed by the government itself.
So what was the final outcome? He was sentenced to prison. Not for torture, remember, but for talking to a reporter. He served 23 months in a federal facility.
And then, while he was actually in prison, the Senate released its landmark torture report. It was this massive official investigation, and it concluded that the CIA's program was ineffective, mismanaged, and way more brutal than anyone knew. It officially proved that everything John Kiriakou had said was true all along.
His vindication was even echoed right on the floor of the Senate by John McCain, a man who knew the horrors of torture firsthand. This quote really cemented Kiriakou's legacy not as a criminal, but as a critical whistleblower who exposed a really dark chapter in American history.
But that vindication came at an almost unimaginable cost. He was bankrupted. His government pension was taken away. He now carries the lifelong brand of a felon, a brand so bad he couldn't even get a job driving for Uber. And to this day, he is still fighting to clear his name with a presidential pardon. And that leaves all of us with a really fundamental question. John Kiriakou's story is a stark warning about the price of truth. It forces us to ask, when the system is set up to punish the people who expose wrongdoing, who in their right mind is going to have the courage to speak up next?